Let me go ahead and ask you all a question. Is MC Hammer a one-hit wonder? Now, I'm sure most of you are gonna say, yeah, he's a one-hit wonder. He's only known for You Can't Touch This and that's it. And while yes, You Can't Touch This is the song that he's most well known for nowadays, and it's the only song of his that has any sort of legacy behind it, it was not the only hit song that MC Hammer had. As a matter of fact, as baffling as it may be, even though it's the only song that he's remembered for nowadays, You Can't Touch This wasn't even his highest charting song. You Can't Touch This peaked at number 8 on the Billboard 100, while in comparison, Have You Seen Her peaked at number 4, Pray peaked at number 2, becoming his highest charting song. Too Legit to Quit peaked at number 5, and Adam's Groove peaked at number 7. And yet, despite this, none of these songs are remembered by the general public. Maybe the people that grew up in the late 80s and early 90s during MC Hammer's very short-lived heyday would remember his other songs, but most people nowadays only know MC Hammer as just the Can't Touch This guy, and that's it. He was very much a relic of the very early 90s. Fun fact, in 1994, long after he became irrelevant, he tried to move towards a more gangsta rap direction, and so he released an album where he tried to be more gangsta in a way, trying to be more like Tupac or the Notorious B.I.G., I guess in a desperate attempt to earn more credibility within the rap community, and all it did was just make him into even more of a joke than he already was, and it basically just ended his career for good. I mean, his career was already dead before this album came out, but it was even deader thanks to this album. Shout out to Todd in the Shadows for making me aware of the existence of this thing. I'm not sure how to feel knowing that there exists an MC Hammer gangsta rap album, and I'm not sure how y'all will feel about that information either. I'm just gonna go ahead and say that I am that kind of person. I only know You Can't Touch This and that's it. That is the only song of his that I know of. And yeah, You Can't Touch This is a stupid, corny song. It's very cheesy, but it's a classic. It, I don't care what people say. It's stupid and corny, but it's also, you can't really hate it because of that. The stupid, corny, very early 90s feel of the song just makes it kind of hard to hate. Again, it was a relic of the very, very early 90s. Between stuff like this and Ice Ice Baby, it really did seem like this is what the future of hip-hop was going to sound like. And then at the very end of 1992, a little album would be released called The Chronic, and let's just say hip-hop would never be the same. Overnight, MC Hammer went from being the future of hip-hop to being this pop sellout joke. As I mentioned before, this was why he transitioned to a more gangsta rap image in 1994. But to no avail. It was too late. There was just no way to convince anyone that the You Can't Touch This guy was actually gangsta and hardcore and could take on Tupac. Although to be fair, I think before The Chronic even came out, MC Hammer had already garnered a reputation for being this lame joke rapper. Allow me to introduce you all to the MC Hammer cartoon. This is Hammerman. This is a cartoon based on MC Hammer. This ran from September to December of 1991, around the time that MC Hammer's popularity was starting to decline. The show ran for 13 episodes. Of these 13 episodes, only 10 episodes are currently available online. 5 of the 10 available episodes are in English, while the other 5 episodes are also in English, however they've been overdubbed in Polish, meaning you could still hear the original English voiceovers, however it's been dubbed over by Polish voiceovers. The remaining 3 episodes of the show at the time of making this are still lost. Shout out to the Lost Media Wiki for this information. It's interesting to note as well that this is the first cartoon that I've looked at on this series to have come out in the 90s. So far we have just been been looking at cartoons from the 2000s onwards. I think the Slim Shady Show is the oldest cartoon that I've looked at on this series, and that came out in like 2001. Well, I suppose it wouldn't hurt to remind people that yes indeed, there were shitty cartoons that came out in the 90s as well. To all the people that say like, oh, 90s cartoons were good and much better than the crappy cartoons we have today, this is just your friendly reminder that there were crappy cartoons in the 90s as well, and this was one of them. Not every 90s cartoon was like Rocko's Modern Life. I'm sorry, but it's the truth. I honestly didn't know what to expect out of Hammerman. I mean, what the do you really expect out of this? A cartoon based on a rapper that was only big in the very early 90s and is only remembered today for one song despite not being a one-hit wonder. Well, I didn't know what to expect out of this thing, but it sure as hell wasn't this. Allow me to go through the lore of this show. And yes, there is lore to this MC Hammer cartoon for some reason. A long time ago, there was a man simply known as Gramps who had a pair of magical shoes that he got from some hip-hop Motown dude. Don't ask me, okay? This isn't the theme song, okay? The magical shoes gave Gramps superpowers to help fight crime and protect the city. As time went on, though, Gramps started to get older, and he wasn't able to fight crime as strongly as he could before. So Gramps, alongside his granddaughter Jody, tried to find someone who could take on the mantle. They head on over to a rec center where they meet someone named Stanley, who, fun fact, that's MC Hammer's name in real life. It was then that the shoes had found their new leader, and whenever Stanley would put on the shoes, he would become the legendary Hammerman. This is all very important information that they just give you in the theme song. There is no episode dedicated to this plot. You would think this would be the plot to like the pilot of the show or something, an origin story for Hammerman, but no. If you didn't have the theme song with you, you would be completely you would not understand what's going on at all. The theme song in general is just one of the most hilariously awkward things I've ever heard in my life. When you think of MC Hammer, you think of this pop rapper, you think of this guy who makes fun and catchy songs that you can dance to. Granted, a lot of his songs are catchy because of their samples. You Can't Touch This would be nowhere near as much of a banger without that super freak sample. But still, you would expect this show to have a really cheesy but catchy theme song, and then it just doesn't. It's extremely long for one thing. It's like around a minute long, and it's like there's no structure to it at all. There's no rhythm, there's no flow, there's nothing. It doesn't really come off like MC Hammer is rapping the theme song. It sounds more like it's in spoken word is what it is, and it just goes on and on and on, and it seemingly never ends.
Hammerman, hammer. Whenever there's a crime, some crooks are gonna do time. They all better beware, cause the Hammerman will be there. Here's how it started, a long time ago. The legend of the hammer and how it began to grow. He was given magical shoes from a hip-hop Motown dude. Together they had power, they stood up for what was right. But Gramps was getting old and he couldn't keep up the fight. Right. So Gramps and his granddaughter, they went out on the road to find a man they knew could tell who was worthy of the load. They met a guy named Stanley who was dancing every night. He helped the kids play every day, his heart was out of sight. So Gramps opened up the bag and took out the magical shoes. He set them on the ground and they soon began to groove. The shoes knew at once they had finally found their man. They hopped right on his feet and he became Hammerman, Hammerman, hammer, Hammerman, hammer, Hammerman, hammer, Hammerman, hammer. Oh yeah!
It's such a hilarious train wreck of a theme song. I will say though, I do love those little moments where you have MC Hammer like himself in live action juxtaposed with the cartoon. It does add a little bit to that cheesy charm. I specifically love this shot. I don't know why, it's just really funny to me. It looks so stupid, but it's like charmingly stupid at the same time. Every episode begins with MC Hammer hanging out with a bunch of kids as he he explains what the episode is going to be about. And then likewise, every episode ends with MC Hammer himself appearing to recap the message of the episode. And again, these are extremely stupid, but they're also kind of charming at the same time. It's exactly the kind of thing I would expect to see in a crappy 90s Saturday morning cartoon about MC Hammer. I don't know what it is, but there's something weirdly endearing hearing MC Hammer tell me that he's my friend.
Be friends with everybody. I'm your friend, and I'm the Hammerman. Peace.
At the same time though, sometimes it could be absolutely hilarious. Like there's an episode of the show that's all about how it's not possible to be 100% perfect. You don't need to be perfect or anything like that. And in the ending segment, he says this.
Every now and then, if you find yourself looking foolish or doing something stupid, don't worry about it. If I had worried about looking silly, hey, I never would have got on stage.
Which would age absolutely amazingly considering the fact that only a few years later MC Hammer would try to rebrand his image. That goofy pop rapper who made You Can't Touch This, he's no more. Now MC Hammer is gangsta and hardcore. Of course though, none of this compares to the actual cartoon episodes themselves, which are some of the strangest I've ever seen. This is one of the most bizarre cartoons I've ever seen, not just because of the concept, not because like it's an MC Hammer cartoon, but generally just because of like the way it feels. I don't know how to describe it. It's like this show is like the uncanny valley of Saturday morning cartoons from the 90s. As I mentioned before, of the 13 episodes made for the show, only 10 of them are available, and of the 10 available episodes, only 5 of them are in English. And so I decided to exclusively watch the 5 English episodes that are currently available. And I have to say, they all have this really off feel to them. Like, I don't know what it is. Well, okay, there's a lot of different things, actually. From time to time, the animation of this show can be really choppy. I don't know why. This is mainly for the first episode, Defeated Graffiti. The animation is just extremely choppy, and that ends up making certain scenes just look really off and awkward. I get what they're trying to showcase, but it just looks really strange with the choppy animation. It's even stranger as well because the theme song doesn't have that choppy animation. There are moments throughout the show where the animation looks normal. It's only really the first episode of the show that has this extremely choppy animation, so I don't know what's up with that. The fact that it's only really in the first episode makes me think, no, this wasn't an intentional decision from the animators. I'm guessing this show had an extremely low budget, which honestly isn't really all that surprising. And maybe for the subsequent episodes they were able to up the budget just a little bit. Not enough for it to actually feel like a normal Saturday morning cartoon, but enough to not have the choppy animation anymore. The editing for this show is again really awkward and off. Sometimes there are moments where you just have dead silence. There are just long pauses in between certain moments that just don't need to be there, and yet they are for some reason. Let's have a montage of some of these moments, shall we?
Got it covered, Joker. I'll go find our man Marmeister and ask for more. That Marmeister conned me. I'd better get Gramps.
We gotta find Stanley.
Forget Stanley. Remix spray. I sure hope this works.
Thanks, guys.
I will spray the entire city.
Thank goodness you're back, Stanley. Jody's disappeared.
Hey, Pop, what's up? Please take care of my baby.
I have no idea why the show is edited this way. It just makes everything feel so awkward and uncomfortable. It's like the show is pausing to catch its breath or something. Like there's no reason for these unnecessary pauses and gaps. It's made even more awkward by the fact that there's just no music at all. Some of these shots would probably be less awkward if they had music in the background, but for some reason, no, there's no music at all. Obviously, of course, there is background music throughout the show. You have instrumental versions of MC Hammer's songs from time to time, but sometimes there are moments in the show where it feels like there should be music playing in the background, but there isn't, and so everything just feels very empty. It's like I'm watching an unfinished version of the episode or something. This is an extremely specific reference, but this reminds me of like when I was a kid, I owned like a lot of SpongeBob DVDs, and some of these DVDs had like storyboard versions of some of the episodes on them as bonus features, and it's like these had no audio in them besides the voice acting. There's no music, there's no sound effects, there's nothing. It's just the voice acting and that's it. And I understand that these are unfinished versions of the episodes, but I can't help but get this kind of off, uncomfortable feeling watching them, just because of how quiet everything is. I just don't know the right word to describe it though. I keep thinking of liminal spaces, even though this has nothing to do with that. I don't know. It makes me think of something, but I don't know what. That's what Hammerman reminds me of. I feel like I'm watching an unfinished version of these episodes. Instead, these are the final versions of the episodes that aired on national television. And it just adds to the uncanny valley feel that this has, you know? So as I mentioned before, this show portrays MC Hammer as a crime-fighting superhero named Hammerman. You have the basic superhero tropes. Stan Lee is the normal guy, and then Hammerman is the alter ego. And nobody except for Gramps knows that Stan Lee and Hammerman are the same person. Every episode has a message attached to it, which, as mentioned before, is further highlighted at the end of each episode, where the real MC Hammer appears to remind you of the message. A few of the messages in the show include, don't drop out of school, nobody's perfect, you don't need to be perfect, don't spray graffiti onto other people's properties, you know, that sort of thing. It's such a shame that there doesn't exist a don't do drugs episode. I could only imagine the corny but charming garbage that episode would be like. As I mentioned before, I only watched the 5 English episodes that are available of the show, and of these 5 episodes, I think the worst one is the second episode, Rapoleon. This episode follows a Napoleon-based rapper named, well, Rapoleon, who wants to become big, both figuratively and literally. He wants to be massively successful, but he also wants to be taller. He hates how short he is, and so he desperately tries everything he can to grow. And then similarly, Jody complains about the fact that Gramps and Stanley won't let her do certain things simply because she's not big enough to do them. For example, watching a basketball game late on a school night. Eventually, Jody and Rapoleon team up together as they share the same problem. Now, even though this is a cartoon based on a musician, it's thankfully not a musical. There aren't any musical numbers, not in any of the 5 episodes that I watched. I can't speak for the other 5 Polish episodes or the 3 Lost episodes, but the 5 episodes that I watched don't have musical numbers in them. Except for Rapoleon. There are several different instances where you have Rapoleon and then Jody, and then the two of them together rapping about how they want to become big. It's unfortunately not funny bad, it's not charming or anything like that, it's just really cringy to sit through.
Tired of being puny, sick of being small. Got a giant soul inside, but it's no use at all. Everybody I meet, they're so tall. I gotta be big.
Eventually, Rapoleon comes up with this genius plan to just simply shrink the city down so that he could be bigger than the entire town. He shrinks down the town, Hammerman comes in to save the day, Rapoleon learns his lesson that he doesn't need to be big, and Jody learns her lesson as well. Everyone lives happily ever after. It's the same cliche crap you've already seen a million times before. Usually these episodes are funny bad, but this is the only episode that isn't really funny bad at all. It's just really boring. And the few musical numbers that are in the episode, yeah, there are not really that many musical numbers in the episode, but they are still hard to sit through. In contrast though, my favorite episode of the show by far is episode 6, Dropping Out. Now I must say in advance that this episode is currently only available in very poor quality. I'm not sure how much footage I can actually show of this episode. I'm pretty sure I can only show screenshots and such of the episode. On the one hand, it's disappointing that this masterpiece of an episode is only available in this extremely awful quality. But on the other hand, that just adds to the experience, if you ask me. Seizure warning, by the way. Please keep in mind that some of the footage shown in this segment will be a little hard to watch if you suffer from epilepsy of any kind.
Don't be a dropout.
I won't drop out.
There you go, my man.
This kid said he was never going to drop out of school, and indeed he would stay true to his word, because after high-fiving MC Hammer, the f***ing end of the world happens.
They don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah! You're the best slam dunker on the whole rec team.
School stinks. I don't need it.
Well, the good news is he's not going to need school for any longer because a black hole just opened up for a few seconds, and I'm pretty sure that could spell impending doom for this city. Seriously, what the hell is this shot even supposed to be? Why is this episode only available in this extremely awful quality? This shit is scarier than any Lost episode creepypasta. Is this that analog horror thing that the kids are into nowadays? Okay, so allow me to try and explain what this episode is about, because believe me, there is a lot to unpack, and I mean a lot. So one of the main villains of the show is this guy who reminds me of Dr. Eggman, specifically the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog version. I guess that's not really surprising because both shows are from the amazingly named Deke Entertainment, but this show came out 2 years before Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, interestingly enough. And so this episode is all about his son, who also bears a slight resemblance to Dr. Eggman, wanting to break his father out of prison. While that's happening, there's a kid at the rec center named Daryl who dreams of becoming a successful basketball player in the future. The thing is though, he decides to drop out of school because he believes that he doesn't need it. He could easily become a successful basketball player without the proper education needed. I don't know why, but Daryl reminds me a lot of Link from the Legend of Zelda cartoon, also from Deke Entertainment. I think it's the voice. It has to be the voice. It just sounds similar.
I'm dropping out. School's a waste of time. I'm gonna be a pro basketball star. I'll be sitting pretty in my own chauffeur-driven limo. My fans will flip for my autograph. I'll be on the sports news every night. I'll be MVP every year, a championship ring on every finger, an unbeatable future Hall of Famer.
In order to convince Daryl that he has to stay in school, he takes him to the futuristic year of 2012. Yeah, 2012. Great year that was, wasn't it? Very futuristic. It is there where the two of them meet the future version of Daryl, who is broke and homeless and doesn't have a job. You also get to see the future 2012 version of Jody. The thing that interests me the most about this episode though is the fact that not once do they ever acknowledge what Hammerman or Stanley or whatever is doing in 2012. You don't ever see a future 2012 version of Hammerman or Stanley, nor is he even brought up once throughout the entire episode. You don't get to see a future 2012 version of Gramps either, although to be fair, it's highly likely that Gramps had kicked the bucket by then. Meanwhile, the future future 2012 version of Eggman Jr. kidnaps Hammerman and attempts to drain the power from his shoes. It's also worth noting that Hammerman and Daryl only have a limited amount of time that can be spent in the future, and they have to make it back to their time before it's too late. It's up to 1992 Daryl and 2012 Daryl to team up together, and yes, they do team up together. Isn't one of the biggest rules for time travel in like media and whatever is that like you can't have your past self meet your future self, because then they would cause like problems within the continuity of time or something like that, and yet for some reason there's just no problem at all. Like, yeah, 1992 Daryl is allowed to talk to 2012 Daryl just casually. 2012 Jody is allowed to talk to 1992 Daryl. Eventually though, they're able to rescue Hammerman. Hammerman saves the day. He puts Eggman Jr. in prison with his father. He goes back in time with Daryl to 1992, and Daryl learns that he has to stay in school and that education matters and all that. It's very corny stuff. What fascinates me about this episode is just the many time travel implications throughout the episode. Again, I find it highly odd that not once do you ever see what the future 2012 version of Hammerman looks like. You don't get to see what Stanley is doing in 2012. Is he still the Hammerman? Or had he become too old just like Gramps, and so now it's someone else that has the shoes? You have Eggman Jr. out in the wild, so that means that crime and villainy and whatever is still a problem in the future. So who's there to stop it in 2012? Not to mention at the end of the episode, Hammerman puts Eggman Jr. into prison with his father, and then he goes back to 1992. If that's the case though, then doesn't that mean Eggman Jr. would still be free? Changing the future doesn't change the past, it's the other way around. If Eggman Jr. gets arrested in 2012, then he's still a free man in 1992. Why is 2012 Jody so casual about meeting up with 1992 Hammerman and Daryl? That just further raises the question of what Hammerman is doing in 2012. I haven't brought them up once in this entire video, but throughout the show there are these two backup dancers that just appear, and I have no idea what their purpose is in the show. They're not narrators, they're not funny. I don't think they're trying to be funny to begin with, so I don't think they're comic relief. They're just characters that are in the show for no reason at all.
Oaktown's money is mine! Yeah!
No one can stop him. Oaktown's money is his.
Ah! Here comes Maurice!
And there he goes.
Chased by 10 tons of robot woe!
We need Hammer to tap his toes.
And indeed, in 2012, in the future, they do appear.
Hey! Stop!
This is something we don't want to witness. If that thing crashes, Jody's out of business.
And then that just raises more questions. Are these the same backup dancers from 1992, or are these newer reincarnations of them? Did the backup dancers travel into the future with Hammerman and Daryl? Do the backup dancers somehow have the magical ability to never age? Like, I don't get it. It makes no sense at all. I love the fact that this version of 2012 Daryl is just okay with the fact that eventually he will cease to exist. Eventually he will be replaced by a far more successful version of Daryl in 2012. And the same thing will happen with Jody as well. This version of 2012 Jody will be replaced by another version that has no recollection of this incident ever happening. So in a technical way, this entire episode just retcons itself. Maybe it's not just Daryl and Jody, maybe everyone in this timeline, in this 2012 timeline, they just just get replaced by a different version. Once again, arresting the 2012 version of Eggman Jr. would prove to be redundant, because this entire future will be replaced with an alternate future, and for all we know, this alternate future has Eggman Jr. free out in the wild, and then who knows when they get replaced. Does this version of 2012 Daryl cease to exist the moment 1992 Daryl goes back to his time? At what point does this version of 2012 Daryl disappear and gets replaced with an alternate, more successful version? Why am I overanalyzing an episode of a MC Hammer cartoon? I don't know. Why am I questioning the continuity of this clearly grounded in reality show? This grounded in reality cartoon where MC Hammer is a crime-fighting superhero with a pair of magical shoes, which, by the way, I haven't brought this up yet, but the shoes can talk because of of course they can. Why would they not be able to talk? They're supposed to be the comedic relief, and so naturally they end up being as funny as you would expect them to be.
Are we ever gonna get any action? I'm so bored.
Oh, just chill. Got any aces?
You got any?
Hey, cut it out!
What out?
You were looking at my cards.
Was not.
Were two?
Not.
Two.
But anyways, yeah, maybe I am overanalyzing this stupid MC Hammer cartoon, but I don't care. I want my realism. I want my realism in this MC Hammer superhero cartoon that nobody remembers. It's no surprise that this episode was written by someone named Robert Askin, because it's got me over here asking a whole lot of questions. The many subtle implications that are included in this time travel episode just make it even better. You combine that with the cheesy, corny, stay in school message, and it's just perfect. This is the best episode of the show, easily. At the same time, I don't doubt the possibility that any of the 5 Polish episodes or the 3 Lost episodes are better. We will unfortunately never know until this entire show gets found. I need all 13 episodes of this show to be found, okay? I just need them to be found. I need more of this funny, bad garbage. I don't want to live in a world where an MC Hammer cartoon, a bad MC Hammer cartoon at that, as if it's somehow possible for an MC Hammer cartoon to be good. I don't want it to be lost media. I don't want to live in a world where this is lost media, and yet it is. This is one of the strangest cartoons I've ever seen, if not the strangest cartoon. I brought up before how this show is from Deke Entertainment, and so I thought this would be similar to like the Super Mario Bros. Super Show or the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, except with MC Hammer instead of Mario or Sonic, but like those feel like normal cartoons in comparison. Maybe they're not genuinely good cartoons, they could be ironic guilty pleasures, but like that doesn't matter, at least they feel like proper cartoons. This thing feels weird. I just don't know what it is. This thing comes so close to just being your average generic early 90s Saturday morning cartoon, but then there's just little things in it that make it really weird and off. It's like the uncanny valley of Saturday morning cartoons. Imagine being that one kid in the early 90s that grew up with this instead of, I don't know, Ren and Stimpy. For sure you got bullied at school, for sure. And yet, despite everything, this show is hilarious in how bad it is. It's such a strange, incompetently made show, but it's also really hard to hate. Combine that with the cheesy but charming live action segments that bookend the episode, and it's just nothing short of perfection, really. Honestly, I wasn't expecting an MC Hammer cartoon to be unwatchable, offensively bad garbage or anything like that, but I wasn't expecting it to be this hilariously bad, hilariously incompetent cartoon. And for that reason, I'm putting this up there as one of the better cartoons I've looked at on this series. For being the first pre-2000s cartoon that I've looked at on this series, this was honestly, it could have been worse. I could have went with a far worse show. Anyways, that's about it. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to like, and if you're new to the channel, maybe consider subscribing, as it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you everyone for watching this video, and I'll see you all next time. Adios.